What is up, everybody? Purple and Gold podcast for Monday, April the 20th. LSU swept at home by Texas A&M. The first time LSU's been swept at home in an SEC series since 2022. Tigers have lost 6 in a row in SEC play, back-to-back sweeps, and they are now 6-12, squarely on the outside looking in of the NCAA tournament bubble. I won't spend too much time going game by game on this thing. Um, LSU's offense was anemic for most of the weekend. They did hit into some tough luck, particularly early in the Sunday game. They had some hard hit balls that were right at people, but this just continues the trend of when they get a little offense, they can't pitch. And when they get somewhat of a little bit of pitching, they can't play offense. And Texas A&M and Ole Miss, two of the hotter teams in college baseball, really exposed LSU the last 2 weekends. Jay Johnson had some interesting comments after the game on Friday night. Friday night really seemed to be the breaking point, I think, for him personally. He almost started to talk about the season almost in a past tense, but he did say that this will never happen again. He blamed himself for the poor roster construction. He mentioned replacing Jared Jones and Ethan Fry, and he mentioned letting people go, which was a mistake in order to play the transfer portal, which again, I can assume probably we're talking about guys like Ryan Costello and Mikey Ryan and, maybe Ashton Larson, maybe some of those guys. We had that conversation on the podcast in a past edition about whether or not LSU should have tried to develop people through the program. And Jay alluded to the fact that he will attempt to do more of that going forward. LSU's at number 65 in the RPI. They've got a real gauntlet of a schedule on the way out. They do have RPI opportunities. Florida's 9, Mississippi State's 18, Georgia's 20. They also have a home series against South Carolina. If you want to entertain LSU's path back to the NCAA tournament, 13 SEC wins would be the bare minimum amount, but you really would have to say they would have to get to 14, which means they would have to go 8-4 on the way out. That would include playing against 3 top 15 or so teams in the country. They've shown no ability to be able to do that. If you want to entertain this, though, you would say they've got to get at least one this weekend on the road at State. That would put them at 7-13. Then they would have to sweep South Carolina. That would get you to 10-13. And then you'd have to find a way to win at least 3 against Georgia and Florida, but more than likely you'd have to win each series to get to 14 and get back into NCAA tournament play. This team's not going to make the NCAA tournament. I think at this point, the fall has just been so hard and so painful, and quite frankly, I think there's an extreme lack of leadership on this team. I think even some of their better players, and I don't think Stephen Milam is a bad player, even though his offense hasn't always been there. His defense has been amazing. We all love Jake Brown. We all love Derek Curiel. I like Kate Arambidi a good bit still. I think LSU has pieces, but none of these guys exert any kind of leadership at all. And that's not to say that they don't behind the scenes. I felt all along that this team lacked emotion. I felt like they lacked passion. This goes all the way back to the when they lost games to like Northeastern and stuff early in the year, I was complaining about that. And all of that stuff has sort of turned out to be true. Um, I know Jay talks a lot about the baseball piece of it, and he's right. They don't hit line drives up the middle. They don't come up with 2 out RBIs. They don't move runners when they need to. And all of that is at the crux, of course, of why they find themselves where they're at. But I would have thought at some point there would have been an emotional outburst somewhere, right? A pregame speech from Derek Curiel, you know, uh, whatever, right? A couple of fist pumps after a strikeout. And I mean, other than, maybe a guy like Eddie Yaman who's come off the bench and given him a little emotion, I think Devin Sheeran brings a little bit to that to the table, and he was awesome yesterday. If there was any bright spot over the weekend, it was that LSU's bullpen only gave up 1 run on Saturday and Sunday. Um, the problem with LSU's pitching staff has been the returning players, right? So, Gavin Guidry has been up and down, but his ERA is not good. Kason Evans has been okay. He's been fine, but he hasn't been a Friday night type of an ace. William Schmidt, I think, early in the season looked good. First 3-4 starts, some of that is tailed off now. Again, if he was a Sunday guy, I think you'd be fine. The injury to Cooper Moore brought him up to pitching on Saturdays, and that just hasn't worked out. Zach Cowan in the beginning of the season was rough. Now he has sort of found it, but again, now he's sort of been pressed into a starting role. They talked up Grant Fontenot a tremendous amount, and again, he's just been up and down. And the guy who I think is a microcosm of where LSU sits right now is Maverick Rizzi. Maverick Rizzi led this team in appearances last year, a team that won the national championship. Granted, they weren't always high leverage appearances, but he led this team in appearances. He went to the Cape Cod League, had a great summer. Joe Healy from D1 Baseball said he threw the cleanest, best inning he saw anybody throw in the Cape Cod League. He was good in the fall. He was good in the lead up to the season. His first couple of outings were good. And I mean, it is so bad now. And I mean, he hit Chris Akopian in the face from Texas A&M on Saturday night with a pitch. Then after a long wait while Hakopian was attended to, the next pitch is in the other batter's box. It is to the point now that I don't know that you can put Maverick Rizzi in another baseball game. I mean, I think they will because they have to, but I don't think you really can do that if you're trying to win games. So I think the pitching staff has been mostly on the backs of the returning players. And look, I think Jay Johnson believes, and I still think he still believes, that Kason Evans can be a Friday night guy. And I think we were all sort of looking for that Cade Anderson jump from William Schmidt because, I mean, major league teams believe in William Schmidt enough to offer him $3 million out of high school. I think there's still something there for both of those guys as they head into the remainder of their sophomore years and then into their junior years. Cooper Moore was doing just fine before he got injured. The pitching staff, despite how bad it's been, walking people, wild pitches, all of those things, I think the pitching staff, with a few recruiting additions and a few tweaks, I think they can relatively quickly fix that going into the remainder of this year and into next year. The offense is going to be tough. They're going to have to really, really play the transfer portal. And look, the transfer portal, we know it giveth and it taketh away, right? And the transfer portal is a dangerous game. There is a rumor over the weekend that Zach York was the most expensive transfer. Now, we don't have that confirmed. Nobody knows what each guy got. But if Zach York was even close to being the most expensive transfer, then that's one of the biggest misses of the NIL transfer portal era for Jay Johnson. Zach York doesn't even play anymore. He was batting 140, no homers in SEC games. He had made a bunch of errors. That experiment is largely over. Mason Braun's been playing first base. Eddie Yaman played first base yesterday. Omar Cerna's seen some time at first base. So I think this has just been a wholesale failure. And look, this is not something exclusive to LSU. Virginia and Texas A&M were the preseason 1 and 2 teams in the poll last year. They both missed the NCAA tournament. Every year since 2021, when Mississippi State won, Mississippi State was terrible the next year. Ole Miss won in 2022. They were 6-24 in the SEC the next year. LSU won in 2023, started out 3-12 in the SEC in 2024, had to fight and scratch and claw to get back into a regional. Tennessee won the national championship in 2024. They made a regional in 2025, but lost their last 2 or 3 series. They just weren't much of anything. And then LSU wins the Natty in 25, and we see what's happening here. This is a real thing. It's not something that is exclusive to the 2026 LSU baseball team. But obviously, we all thought that this roster was loaded and that this would be one of Jay's more talented teams and that they would buck that trend, and they haven't. And they're probably not going to, and we all need to recognize that. And so it's going to be a little bit of an earlier summer with no LSU sports carrying us deep into June. One other side note before we get out of here, Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network broke some news this morning that we now know the injury that Garrett Nussmeier has. Garrett Nussmeier has a cyst on his spine, and that was pushing on some nerves, and that was the cause of his oblique pain and his oblique issues. He has not had surgery yet, but this is a relatively non-invasive, easy procedure. They would go in and remove the cyst. He would probably be out 2-3 weeks until the stitches healed, and he would be back and ready to go. It's very good for Garrett that this information has come to light now. The NFL draft, of course, starts on Thursday night. I expect Garrett Nussmeier to be a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick, and I think this is a little bit of a condemnation on Brian Kelly. I think certainly those early season non-conference games and probably that first SEC game against Florida, there was that 3-week stretch there. I think they played Southeastern, then Florida, then someone else. He probably should have sat those games out, but Brian Kelly was so desperate and LSU was so desperate that they played him, and he never got any better. And we all know how that ended up. So good for Garrett that it's nothing serious. Good for him that it's been diagnosed. And we hope that he can have the proper, surgery or whatever it takes there. And then he can go on and have a very successful NFL career. That'll do it today. Please like and subscribe on the channel. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. It really helps me out here. And if you could share the video and get others to subscribe, that would really help. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit about LSU spring football. That is in the process of winding down. We've got some good tidbits there to talk about. And at some point, we hope to have some transfer portal additions on the men's basketball side with Will Wade that we can talk about. As always, be good to one another, boot up, and always, always, always go Tigers.